welcome everyone. Great. Welcome everyone. This is a presentation of people reaching out for Unity University. Proud, our mission is to sponsor opportunities that will encourage Ferguson residents to work together to build a community of harmony and equity within a diverse group of people. Tonight's presentation by Dr. Napoleon Williams III is kind of an encore of a presentation we did back in March. That was done in collaboration with the Confluence Scholars Strategy Network, Dr. Mary Painter and Dr. Kimball and others helped us put that event on. It received such good response that we were asked by several people to do an encore presentation, which we are doing tonight, and appreciate Dr. Williams III to be able to be here again to enlighten us. Tonight's presentation is in large part thanks to Jill Holtrup and her engineering consulting firm, Design Acoustics, who have advocated for this and have also provided financial support for tonight's presentation. So thank you very, very much. We also have another partner on this, and that is CYC, which we'll let be introduced in a few moments. So before we move to that, just a couple things for the agenda tonight. I will turn this over to Tasneem to do the introductions, and then we will, this is not our ideal. Proud prefers to have dialogues or good conversations so that we can all share. But in the world of COVID and Zoom, we have had to opt to these more formal presentations. So what we will be doing tonight is Dr. Williams III will be doing his presentation complete. And after he is done, then we will be opening up for questions and answers. We will have that done through the chat. So if you have questions you would like to pose to Dr. Williams III, you please put them in chat and send them to Cassandra Butler. And she will be then acting as our facilitator for the Q&A, reading the questions out to our presenter, and then she will continue monitoring for any follow-up questions to have. So apologize if that's a little bit, it's not as fluid as we would like, but that's the only way that we've really seen that works well. So without further ado, then I will introduce Tasneem Haq, who is she's with Creating Whole Communities, and she's going to introduce that organization a bit and then introduce tonight's presenter. So thank you for being here.
Hi, everyone. I hope you're all well. My name is Tasneem Haq. I am the program coordinator for Creating Whole Communities, and CWC is excited to partner on this event with Proud. So I just want to talk about CWC and the kind of work we do and how we supported Dr. Williams' research. So CWC brings together the University of Missouri St. Louis, specifically the School of Social Work and Public Policy, as well as the Collaborative Vision, brings together UMSL and the University of Missouri Extension Community Economic Development staff and the St. Louis region's neighborhoods, such as residents, policymakers, business leaders, et cetera. So bringing together UMSL, University of Missouri Extension and the region's neighborhoods to focus on strengthening our communities. And we do this through 3 buckets. I'll go over the first two briefly. Civic dialogue, we hold a lot of community conversations, forums, presentations, events on important issues such as gentrification and redistricting. We also have a leadership capacity building bucket where we have leadership training programs where residents we support residents in building capacity to have a more of a voice and leadership role of what happens in the region. And then our third bucket, which is most relevant to today, is our research bucket, where we have a faculty fellows program in which UMSL faculty partner with the community to research important place-based challenges through practice-based research. And so a researcher and a community leader will work together to answer a critical research question for neighborhoods and municipalities. And through this new knowledge and insight, we would lead to creating stronger communities. And so Dr. Williams in 2019 was a CWC Research Fellow, and he, as a fellow, he looked at the role of municipal governance in stabilizing inner ring suburbs in St. Louis. That was the title, and I will put the link to his brief in the chat so you can read about it after this today's meeting. He looked at the role, he looked at municipal governance effects on economic conditions and racial composition, and municipal governance role in achieving and maintaining municipal level stabilization in inner ring suburbs in St. Louis. So he looks at changing demographics and how that relates to destabilization depending on the actions of the municipal governance. And so he provides examples of municipalities that have thrived as they grew in diversity and how that could have, and otherwise those that did not thrive, and the relation to that in terms of the actions of municipal governance in dealing with integration. And so in that study, Ferguson was included, and he looked at how policy administration and actions, this has affected stabilization. And so today he will talk about some of these things, Ferguson's municipal governance, local government role in stabilization. And so without further ado, I will introduce Dr. Williams, and then I'll hand it over to him. And so Dr. Napoleon Williams III is an adjunct professor in the Department of Politics at New York University, where he teaches several courses, including race and politics and the politics of poverty and welfare. As a public policy consultant, Dr. Williams specializes in municipal government, public policy administration, racial residential patterns, and urban politics. Dr. Williams has over 14 years of experience in community organizing, nonprofit management, and designing and delivering capacity building trainings. His personal and professional experiences equip him with a unique perspective on the interrelated dynamics of race, place, and civic engagement. A native of North St. Louis City and former Creating Whole Communities Research Fellow at the University of Missouri St. Louis, Dr. Williams' research includes an in-depth analysis of municipal governance in the city of Ferguson and focuses on the role of local government in neighborhood stabilization. So we are honored to have Dr. Williams today. And so I will hand it over to you. You're on mute.
You're on mute, Napoleon.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? I can't. Okay, so I can't hear you all now. Okay, that's how it works. All right. All right, let's get into this. All right, so thank you for that awesome introduction, Tasneem. I mean, that introduction was so flattering. Some may argue that I must have written it myself. So great job. I'll get that check in the mail ASAP. Before I begin the presentation, please bear with me, as I would be remiss if I were to neglect extending my genuine appreciation to Alan and the members of the Proud group for their leadership in coordinating this event and for being gracious enough to invite me back to be with you once again. I believe that these events serve as a testament to Proud's continued commitment to community collaboration, betterment, and empowerment. And particularly as it relates to their inviting me back, well, I would argue that that's simply a testament to someone at Proud having a keen eye for exceptional talent. But no, in all seriousness and sincerity, it is truly an honor to be invited yet again to participate in such an important discussion. Many, many thanks go to the members of Proud. And I would also like to extend a sincere thank you to the administrators and scholars at Creating Whole Communities, led by my good friend and longtime academic mentor, Dr. Todd Swanstrom. The fine folks at Creating Whole Communities are also committed to helping empower communities from within, and they're doing some incredible work. In fact, as Tasneem spoke about, I perhaps may not have been in a position to sit here before you today and do this presentation as a so-called expert on local government in Ferguson had it not been for the generosity of the CWC. So thank you so very much. Okay, so how about we get into some local government, huh? So what I'm going to do now, I'm actually going to share my screen and bring you all in to see what I'm seeing. And as soon as I can get back. Okay, so it's not allowing me to share my screen. Okay, administrators.
Okay,
Yeah, so I'm attempting, it's on a function now that is not allowing me to go.
okay, try it now. Try it
Okay.
now, Napoleon. I need to hear. Are you having any success? No, still not?
Yeah, I'm thinking I may have to close down what I have now and just maybe restart from the beginning. So let me try that.
Okay, and if that doesn't work, I think I have a copy
Yeah,
that
it's literally not allowing me to even bring up the Zoom back up, the picture to see the Zoom.
do you have a small, your small
Yeah.
icon should bring that picture right back to you. That-
Okay, so let's see if this works. So we'll go here.
Shrink this.
Can you see it?
Yes,
Yeah.
You got it?
you can.
All right, perfect. All right, let's get into this thing. Technology, let me tell you. All right. Okay, so, all righty. Now, it just may be me, but I can't help but feel like every time I speak to a group regarding local government, I'm compelled to point out how relevant and timely the discussion is. And of course, the last time I spoke with this group, I pointed that out as there was an election on the horizon, some redistricting concerns, and I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I want to say a city manager vacancy that was yet to be filled. Wow. Now talk about relevant and timely. However, in preparing for tonight's discussion, it hit me. And I thought to myself, well, the local government situation in Ferguson today is distinctly different than it was in late winter, early spring, when we last spoke. So then my anxiety kicked in and I thought, wait a minute, why in the world would they invite me back to speak about local government again? What could they possibly want this time that I didn't share last time? And how in the world could I ever deliver anything as relevant and timely as that presentation in March? I mean, back in those days, you know, March 2021, there was the drama of an impending election with the integral components of redistricting and the quality of integrity of a city manager search hanging in the balance. The setting was perfect. The tension so thick it was palpable. You could almost taste it. Not to mention, I delivered a flawless performance, leveraging each of these dramatic elements. Now, if you were there, you know what I'm talking about. But in preparation for tonight, it dawned on me. There is no drama of a pre-election. is no longer the pre-new city manager, Ferguson. What could they possibly want from me? So I asked myself, self, what makes tonight's discussion relevant and timely? Surely this discussion is not as important as the previous one, given this year's changes in circumstances in Ferguson's local government. And self looked me square in the eyes, because of course I was talking to myself in the mirror, and said to me, well, sir, it's like this. Yes, you are correct in your identification of the differences in circumstances. Local elections, redistricting, and vacancies in key offices of municipal government's leadership can invoke great apprehension and uncertainty, especially for members of a civically engaged citizenry. And prolonged vacancies and/or multiple turnovers in municipal leadership in relatively short periods of time can be incredibly distressing for local residents, property owners, and proprietors alike. However, make no mistake about it, a conversation about local government is in and of itself always relevant and timely because of the direct and immediate impact decisions, indecisions, and non-decisions have on the citizens who live, work, and play in that city. You see, local government is responsible for the procurement, stewardship, and protection of that city's resources, safety, and sustainability. Therefore, discussions related to local government are not only always relevant and timely, but they are also required for cities to be viable, stable, and self-sustaining, let alone thriving. So rest assured, regardless of where the situation stands at City Hall, tonight's discussion is indeed an important and worthwhile endeavor. So after my initial internal struggle, in which self laid out a strong argument for the importance and benefits of ongoing conversations around the functions and inner workings of local government, I then set out to identify what I would focus on for tonight's discussion. After all, I definitely couldn't repeat the presentation from last time. I mean, who wants to sit and listen to me talk about that stuff again? I can only imagine that after such an extended period of not knowing how that city manager situation would turn out, the last thing the fine residents of Ferguson want to hear is me talking about that appointment of the Ferguson city manager this past summer, and how important it is for them to know what a city manager is responsible for and how that relates to the rest of local government. You see, because that part's been taken care of. Well, self said, yeah, you could be right. But then again, look at it this way. What if that healthy dose of high hopes that once replaced the anticipation and apprehension of not knowing who the city manager would be, what if it itself is being challenged by an uncertainty regarding the many complex components of local government? In earnest, how do you hold this new city manager, and for that matter, the entire city government as a whole, accountable, if you really don't know what that looks like? What if the same things that you shared in March are in fact in this moment the very things the citizens of this fine city need to hear? Perhaps some of them are listening to this lecture for the second time, but maybe, just maybe, this time they will be listening and hearing. As the age-old proverb 4:7 says, with all thy getting, get understanding. And to this end, this evening, you, self, and I will explore 5 main topics. These include a refresher on the 3 levels and branches of government in the United States. We will visit briefly the various forms of municipal government in the state of Missouri, as well as the form of government utilized in the city of Ferguson for nearly 70 years. This form of government is known as the council manager form of government. And the council manager form of government includes a strong city manager. We'll talk all about what a strong city manager really means. And we will learn all about why the city manager is so consequential to the health and stability of Ferguson. After that, we'll take a look at some municipal services, departments, and offices in Ferguson's local government. Learn a bit about the respective duties, the chain of command, and the policy process. And finally, we'll wrap up with some key takeaways, as well as a call to action. Now, my hope is that something I say this evening will answer a lingering question, spark a person's passion for public service, or perhaps inspire someone to conceive an idea that may lead to the development and implementation of more effective ways of empowering communities and bringing about better municipalities. And who knows, that someone might be you. All right, let's jump into this thing, shall we? Now, back in 1982, during a congressional primary battle, Tip O'Neill, who was Speaker of the House at the time, said, "All politics is local." Of course, this was not some profound philosophical declaration or anything. And in fact, the speaker was not referring to municipal level politics or his district for that matter. Get this, he wasn't even talking about a district in his own state. You see, Tip had gone into another state to sell local people on a $1 billion jobs bill that he introduced during his reelection campaign, and one that the local US representative opposed. Well, Tip's tactic paid off. He garnered support for the bill from local people, and this ignited pressure on his colleague to support the bill. The move was legendary, and Tip's "all politics is local" phrase is now widely used to emphasize the importance of local elections and civic engagement. Now, Tip demonstrated that the local level is not only vitally important in matters of local concern, but it is just downright important. The moral of the story is 40 years ago, locals carried enough sway to affect a dispute between congressional heavyweights from two different states. So surely 40 years later, it is safe to say that locals carry more than enough sway to ensure that their local government is competent, that their concerns are addressed, and that the city's finances are managed intelligently and responsibly. That said, municipal stability should never be taken for granted. The biggest mistake residents can make is believing their municipality's desirability, fiscal health, and physical conditions are the responsibilities of elected officials, appointed administrators, and city employees. This is absolutely false. And in fact, stability does not occur or remain without a civically active citizenry. And not just any civically active citizenry, but one that is knowledgeable about municipal services and one that understands that all politics is local. If you've ever been reluctant to talk about the levels and branches of government because you felt like you were preaching to the choir, remember this: choirs are members of the congregation too. They appreciate a good sermon as much as anybody else. So preach. Now, for those of us that may feel like other people know more about politics or all that government stuff than we do, I feel you. Believe me, I do. But hear me out. Between me and you, this political stuff ain't as complicated as people like to make it out to be. Check this out. The federal level of government is cool. I mean, we all know some people that work for the federal government, and they're usually pretty nice people. Take the president, for instance. How about your US Representative Cori Bush, Senators Blunt and Hawley, and even Supreme Court justices like Chief Roberts and Associate Justice Sotomayor? They're all valuable actors on the stage of federal government. However, unless they live on your block, none of them will be concerned with the issues affecting your day-to-day quality of life. And it's not that they don't care. It's just that not only do they represent your interests, they represent the interests of a much broader catchment of citizens. Given this fact, it's not practical to expect a government official who represents the country, the state, or a congressional district at the national level to attend to the concerns of any single municipality, neighborhood, or block. Let's face it, President Biden and Vice President Harris are not concerned with sales tax receipts or economic development in the downtown business district of Ferguson. And unless Bush, Blunt, or Hawley call Ferguson home, they're but partly concerned. The decisions made at the federal level of government do not have the immediate and personal impact that local decisions have. So the next time you think of the federal level of government, just think feds, F-E-D-S, forever doing something. That's right. The feds are forever doing something, but are rarely doing something for the benefit of the place you call home. The Fed's idea of doing something covers a much bigger slice of earth and includes way more people than little old me in my little old town. As for state level of government, well, that gets us a little closer to home, but it's still not as impactful to daily life or to the local ecosystem as municipal government. Yes, the governor and other statewide elected officials, state courts, the state house, and the state senate, sure, they make decisions that affect our health and well-being and our safety and security. But as a state collective and as clusters of citizens delineated according to state districts, yeah, state officials and administrators do govern less people and less land mass than federal officials and administrators, but they're still answerable to more people and are responsible for larger geographic areas than local officials and administrators. Think of it this way. While the feds are forever doing something, but rarely doing anything for locals, the state, S-T-A-T-E, well, sometimes their acts take effect. In other words, state government makes decisions that can have a more instantaneous personal impact. For instance, the state owns and operates the interstates and the main arterial roads in Missouri. As such, a state action today could dramatically affect your experience as a commuter, cyclist, or pedestrian as soon as tomorrow morning. Now that's some power. As for local government, county officials and administrators serve as the local government in unincorporated areas. But for residents of incorporated cities such as Ferguson, local means local. And when it's all said and done, the lifebloods of communities are locals. Get it? Lifebloods of communities are locals, L-O-C-A-L. Okay, that's my last acronym, I promise, but you get the point. Local is critical. Okay, so the legislative branch of government, also known as Congress, makes the laws. The judicial branch of government, otherwise referred to as the court system, explains those laws. Make sure those laws do not violate provisions set forth in the US Constitution, and adjudicates legal disputes. The executive branch, which includes executive offices, cabinet, departments, agencies, and committees, well, they carry out the laws and enforce those laws. Now, since we agree that all politics is local and that the lifebloods of communities are locals, we shall focus solely on the local level of government. And in doing so, we identify the legislative branch at the local level as the Ferguson City Council. The City Council makes the laws. Now, the judicial branch at the local level is the municipal court. It adjudicates legal disputes. And finally, there's the executive branch. However, that's where the comparison between the federal, state, and local levels gets a little tricky. It's intuitive to think that since the executive branch is headed by the president on the federal level and the governor on the state level, then quite naturally, the mayor must be the local level executive, right? Well, that's not always the case. While the mayor does serve as the chief executive of a city with a mayor council or mayor board of aldermen form of government, in a city like Ferguson, the mayor has no executive power. Let me repeat that. The mayor has no executive power in a city like Ferguson. Why? Well, because Ferguson operates under the council manager form of government. The form of government a city utilizes is one of the single most important factors in determining the way a city operates. And quite frankly, form of government can impact the quality of city management. So, what are the forms of municipal government in Missouri? Well, there are a board of trustees that operate just like the name suggests. This form of government is used in smaller cities like the village of Hanley Hills and the town of Norwood Court. Now, in a commission form of government, each member of the city council, referred to as the commission, serves as head of a department of city services. The commission form of government is extremely rare in Missouri. And in fact, the last time I checked, I believe there were only 2 cities in the entire state operating under a commission form of government. Then you've got the mayor board of aldermen form of government, and also referred to as the mayor council form of government. And if you're familiar with the city of St. Louis or the city of Jennings, this form of government should ring a bell. Now, there are some important distinctions to point out in mayor board of aldermen, mayor council structures. For instance, in some mayor council cities, administrative officers like the city collector and the city assessor are elected officials with powers, duties independent of the mayor and the council. On the other hand, in some mayor council municipalities, administrative offices are not headed by elected officials, but rather individuals appointed by the mayor and council and who report directly to the mayor and council. Then there is the mayor city administrator alderman, also known as the mayor city administrator council form of government. Perhaps some of you have had the pleasure of visiting Branson, Missouri, which is a popular town for tourism located in Southwest Missouri. Well, if so, you were in a city that is governed by a mayor, city administrator, alderman form of government. This form of government combines the mayor council form with a trained full-time municipal administrator and enables the mayor and council to delegate specific duties and responsibilities to the person in this appointed position. Now, although the administrator is officially accountable to the mayor and the council, the administrator tends to serve at the pleasure of the mayor. So quite different from my personal favorite, which is the council manager form of government. Don't you just love the sound of that? I mean, just listen to how it rolls off the tongue. Council manager. Well, in a council manager form of government, the city employs a full-time, professionally trained executive to navigate the ship on a daily basis. Now, you may be thinking, Napoleon, if the council manager form of government is so awesome, why doesn't every city adopt the structure? Well, I'm glad you asked. Missouri state statutes limit the forms of government available for use by municipalities based on the municipality's population at the time of incorporation. This is known as a classification system. In the state of Missouri, a community may incorporate as a village, and as mentioned earlier, villages are the smaller cities and towns that typically have less than 500 residents at the time of incorporation. Villages are permitted to have only one form of government, an elected board of trustees, with either 5 or 9 members, depending on the population. As for 4th-class cities, they're more populated than the villages, but still smaller than 3rd-class cities. Now, 4th-class cities are permitted to have either the mayor board of aldermen form or the mayor city administrator alderman form. Also, the board of aldermen may adopt the city administrator form by ordinance. Okay, that's your villages and your 4th-class cities and allowable forms of government in a nutshell. That brings us to the big kids on the block, the 3rd-class cities. So 3rd-class cities are granted greater flexibility and authority to establish the mayor council form, the council manager form, the commission form, or the mayor city administrator council form. Now, if we were back in the year 1953, I'd tell you that Ferguson was a 3rd-class city. But in 1954, Ferguson did something that only a handful of Missouri cities like Kansas City, St. Louis, and University City had done by that point. And that's adopt what's called a home rule charter. Home rule is a provision reserved for Missouri's largest municipalities. And after land growth through annexations and exponential population growth through migrations and relocations, Ferguson was a growing city in need of a strong governmental structure designed to meet the challenges and complexities associated with larger, more populated cities. Home rule granted Ferguson the authority to select any form of government the city deemed suitable. And when Ferguson adopted its home rule charter in 1954, the city elected to go with the council manager form of government, which in my humbled expert opinion was a good call. But like anything in life, there are benefits and there are trade-offs to having a council manager form of government. For instance, the council manager form provides clear lines of authority and responsibility. Employment with the city is based on ability and productivity rather than on political affiliation. And council manager cities have less elective offices, which allow for shorter ballots and less voter confusion, just to name a few benefits. But on the flip side, city managers exercise an extraordinary amount of power and authority over city affairs, and can even exercise substantial influence over elected officials, essentially enjoying administrative and policy dominance. Plus, city managers are often transplants from other cities and states. And although they are experts in running cities, they may not be familiar with local problems and needs. Moreover, they may not be loyal to a city or totally committed to seeing something like a revitalization campaign all the way through. At any time, they could be offered a job in another market, or they could be offered a more lucrative employment package by a larger, richer city in the same market. Meanwhile, city councils and council manager cities may lack official leadership because, unlike in mayor council cities where the mayor has veto power, in council manager cities, the mayor is an at-large council person with one equal vote and no veto power. In other words, the only difference between the mayor and other council members in a council manager form of government is that the mayor is elected by all the voters, while council persons are elected by voters from their respective ward only. Other than presiding over meetings of the council and some symbolic and ancillary duties, the mayor enjoys no more power or responsibility than any other member of the council. I repeat, the mayor in a council manager city, i.e. Ferguson, has no more power or responsibility than the council members from the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd wards. Now, let me talk a little bit about why I have such a big crush on the council manager form of government. Well, as the great political philosopher, Dr. Terry Jones once told me, council manager form equals city manager. City manager equals professionalism, and professionalism equals best practice. From those wise words, we can safely deduce that best practice in municipal government and services is a good thing. But hold up, not so fast, my friend. We went over benefits and trade-offs of the council manager form of government. So we understand that having a professional city manager serving as the CEO of the corporation residents call their city is not always all good. We need to identify how to increase the good and decrease the not so good. And to do this, we explore the city manager more in depth. So a council manager form of government is also known as a strong city manager form of government because the city manager is boss. Even though the council appoints, in other words, hires the city manager and the city manager answers to the council, at the end of the day, the city manager runs the show. Look at it this way. The city manager is the CEO and the council is the board of directors. The CEO is at the office, in the trenches, putting out fires, hiring, firing every day. The council is meeting what, twice a month, 3 times in a busy month? So while your council person may get the props and take the knocks, it's that city manager that is earning that council person them props and knocks. Now, let's talk about these fellas in the illustration. These are 4 city managers that taught me nearly everything I know about the position. These individuals served in the role of city manager in various cities in various decades from the 1960s until the 2010s. Okay, let's check them out. So top left, I'll give this city manager a big A for effort. This person really tried to be an effective city manager, was a dedicated administrator that attended conferences and trainings, continually trying to improve through professional development and best practice sharing. Unfortunately, top left just did not have what it takes to get the job done. And it showed through personnel challenges, fiscal boo-boos, and a host of other mishaps. Okay, now top right, very talented, knowledgeable, and connected. However, a bit arrogant, a know-it-all Paul, if you know what I mean. You know, the type is always the smartest person in the room, never trusted the team and didn't allow others to contribute with any substance. And that turned people off. So eventually the city lost valuable personnel to other cities, and cracks began to show more and more because the city was being ran by a one-person show. And eventually the curtain dropped, and most unceremoniously, I might add. Now, did you happen to get a load of our buddy bottom right? Hilarious, right? If top right was city manager do it all, bottom right was Royal Highness King city manager. Like we covered earlier, city managers are endowed with a great deal of power, authority, and influence. And there are those city managers that not only know this power, but also who are so shrewd at leveraging it, council persons are completely rocked to sleep and people don't know what hit them. Poor things. All they know is one day they look up and a dictator is in power. The cupboard is bare and the council persons have absolutely no answers. But fret not, ye citizens of little faith, for competent and courageous city managers on the job. And he's committed to the city for the long haul. And he is my personal city manager hero. I give to you bottom left. Now, this former city manager served his hometown for 36 years. Yes, a homegrown hero that exemplifies the benefits I outlined earlier and neutralizes most of the trade-offs. This city manager pioneered innovative strategies for revitalizing the city's downtown business district and economic environment, created new administrative departments to address contemporary challenges, and leveraged internal assets and human capital, as well as community, regional, and national resources. Ultimately, this individual put in what I like to call a textbook example of an excellent city manager career, and one that the people of that city are certainly grateful for. Now, I'm not saying that there were not other impressive city managers throughout the years, because there most certainly were. In fact, I can think of several from several cities, Ferguson included. I won't reference the decade, but what I will say is that the city of Ferguson is no stranger to highly skilled, qualified, and competent administrators. Furthermore, contrary to popular narratives about Ferguson's history, brilliant, competent, and courageous administrators and policymakers have served in Ferguson's local government in every decade that I studied, which dates back to the 1940s. Now, we have to understand when we're talking about local government in Ferguson or any other council manager with a strong city manager form of government, whether we're talking 60 years ago or 6 minutes from now, we have to understand the local political system, and we have to participate in the local political system. And we have to take full advantage of the local political system by leveraging the mechanisms of that system to ensure our needs, our concerns, our neighborhoods, our blocks, our households are counted among the priorities of the city. That goes for white, Black, brown, indigenous, immigrant, Democrat, Republican. It goes for everyone. You must know the system. I look at it this way. The administration headed by the city manager is the engine that runs the city. And the policymakers are the gas that fuel the engine. The gas is critical to the engine running, but the gas is not actually running the engine. Get it? Now let's take a moment and conceptualize the flow chart. Familiarize yourselves with the chain of command, the flow of municipal services. Who's responsible for what? And this is also provided for you on the website. Now, visualize these departments, not as offices in a building on Church Street, but instead visualize the people doing the work. Picture the certified public accountant crunching numbers, or the city planner conducting research and making recommendations for rezoning or economic growth and development. Do you see the street crews repaving and repairing potholes? What about the maintenance workers tending to the fallen leaves in the park and the increased indoor activities in the community center as the temperature dips? Imagine, if you will, all those humans working on your behalf. Better yet, working for you. You, the local, the Ferguson resident, you are actually the boss. You elect the council persons who hire the city manager, who supervises the city department heads, who supervise the city employees who work for you. They all work for you. And it is your duty to know what their duties are so that you can hold them accountable, whether they're doing a good job or a not so good job. Essentially, while I prefer the council manager form of government, and I recommend third-class cities operating under mayor council, mayor city administrative council forms aimed to adopt the structure, when the smoke clears and the dust settles, the form of government your city has is irrelevant if the people in government are not doing their jobs effectively, or you're not involved in the process to demand that they do. In that scenario, a super city manager is not going to do you much more good than a souped up city manager. As the late great Douglas W. Palmer, former mayor of the city of Hazelwood, once told me, and I paraphrase, don't thank your city's form of government for success, and don't blame your city's form of government for failures. At the end of the day, people are running the city, not government structures. People. Now, as people, we're naturally wired for self-preservation. We tend to be rather liberal with our pointing of the finger outward and quite conservative when it comes to pointing the finger inward. So let us pause to consider, no matter who the city manager is and no matter who my council persons are, the success of my local government depends on the quality and quantity of my input, mine, me. So let's talk a bit about how we get better city management, better municipal services, better local government. I like to use the term stable. Stable refers to a healthy, vibrant municipality that is strong economically, solid physically, and overall desirable. We all would love to grow, do better, improve, but sometimes just plug in the tire so we can get back on the road to where we're trying to go is better than sitting still making no progress. So we have to take another look at this. Now, there's nothing wrong with knockdown, drag out debates about which way to go, what turns to make, and what speeds to travel. After all, we're all in the car together. We all have a say in where this thing goes from here. However, we must agree on one destination. We don't necessarily have to agree on how we get there, but we must be able to at least agree on where it is we're trying to go. If we all agree that stability is a mutually agreeable initial destination, and that's where we want to go first, then best practice policy is the way. And how do we get best practice policy? Well, I'm glad you asked. The first thing we do is remain civically active, or get civically engaged if we're not already. And this does not simply mean attending council meetings, submitting your questions and comments during the public hearings, or organizing voter registration drives. While these things are definitely important and can be helpful, the work of getting best practice policy enacted must also include your involvement at the advisory level. Now, what do I mean by the advisory level? The advisory level is the function of municipal government populated and often operated by citizen volunteers who serve on boards and commissions, researching, identifying, debating, and developing ideas, and making recommendations to the policymakers. Ferguson has an impressive array of citizen volunteer boards and commissions, including but not limited to Architectural Board, Civilian Review Board, Human Rights Commission, Youth Advisory Board, a Traffic Commission. I mean, that's just to name a few. but I can't leave out my personal favorite, the Ferguson Farmers Market Commission. The point here is that there is something for everyone, and more hands lighten the load. Just remember, your council persons are residents like you, just doing their part in public service. They don't have all the answers. They often depend a great deal on those policy recommendations coming out of the advisory boards and commissions. And think of it this way. You're not only helping your local council persons out, you're helping yourself out more. Now, as my brilliant wife, Dr. Kenya Williams, pictured center right there, she found in her research that there are many benefits of board service, including leadership development, professional enhancement, and career advancement. In other words, not only does serving on boards and commissions help protect and improve the stability of your city, but board service can also boost your professional development and help you become a more prosperous professional. I mean, I don't know about you, but sign me up. Okay. So we went to fergusoncity.com to learn more about the boards and commissions and to locate vacancies in membership. We completed and submitted an application for service on a board or commission via the link provided on the website, or we emailed it to the Ferguson City Clerk. We're now contacted and invited to serve. We are serving. We're offering our ideas and respective expertise, and thanks to our involvement, the City Council is producing best practice policy. Way to go, team. And guess what? The bills are getting along great. The policymakers are cranking out best practice policy left and right. And times are good. And for these two handsome fellows, well, they represent two municipal level policymakers from whom I've learned a great deal about serving in public institutions with incredible integrity, ingenuity, and instinct. I won't share their names because they remain active in public office, but what I will share is that don't sleep on your local politicians. There's some really, really talented and dedicated people serving on councils. And the best ones know the value of fully seated and active boards and commissions. And they know that better municipalities start with best practice policy, but most certainly does not end with best practice policy. Think about it. Policymakers aren't aiming for failed policy. Most policies look good on paper, but as we all know, well-intentioned policies often result in poor outcomes, unintended consequences, regrets, and resentments. This is because best practice does not only involve the enactment of smart, innovative, or proven municipal code. Best practice policy requires ongoing evaluation, refinement, and support. Think of it this way. Policy determines the mode of operation, decides which tools to put in the toolbox, and serves as a guide along the journey. Make no mistake, policy is not good or bad. Outcomes are. So what does all of this have to do with municipal services, local government? Well, I'll tell you. You see, look at that little sign that says help in the middle of the crowd. Now, it appears that those people around that person are disinterested people. But guess what? The person holding that sign is your city manager. That person is at the center of all things municipal services. And whether it's maintaining stability or realizing success through an amazing renaissance, it requires a concerted, collective, and collaborative effort. Yes, you have a lot on your plate. We all do. There's work, school, family, faith, recreation, life in general. But guess what? Local government impacts each of those areas in one way or another. There's no way around it. Okay? So what is my call to action for you? Number one, every chance you get, talk about municipal services and local government with people. Remember, the local level is the level that is actually affecting the quality of your everyday life and the life of others around you. Number two, join a citizen volunteer board or commission. Your voice, your ideas, Your help is needed to inform and construct best practice policy. And number 3, consider adopting a department. Yes, you heard me right. Adopt a city department. What does that look like, and why in the world would I want you to do it? Well, first of all, what I mean is identify one city department that you are most interested in. Just start with one. Let's say that it's Department of Finance. You're going to get to know everything there is to know about the finance department, the director, the staff, the degrees, the expertise, association memberships, accounting strategies, reporting cycles, audit results, you name it. You're going to get to know them, and they're going to get to know you. Not necessarily in a disruptive way or an intrusive manner, but more like a stakeholder staying abreast of the health and conditioning of your investment. Remember, the chain of command. The buck stops with you, not the council member, not the city manager, not the department head, you. See, it's not that we fail to identify problems, quite the contrary. We're actually very skillful at identifying problems. No, the biggest obstacle to realizing better local government is the difficulty of getting a bunch of people with varying views, ideologies, and interests to set aside those differences and come together to tackle a common problem. And all too often, we sacrifice the good for the sake of the perfect. Remember, perfect is the enemy of the good. No local government, no municipality, none of that is perfect. Now, don't get me wrong. I have dreams of world peace and harmony among all humans too. I mean, I can kumbaya with the best of them. However, I also accept the fact that there are some people who do not share my preference for collaborative action, cordial engagement, or collegiality. So I'm fully aware of that. It's always going to be there. People who just don't like me, or whatever the reason is. Honestly, I don't care. The only power you can wield over me is that which I forfeit to you. So check this out, neighbor. The problem is the city budget. Now, I acknowledge your recommendation to explore layoffs in city personnel to achieve much needed cuts in spending. However, I suggest we approach this fiscal year's deficit with a more entrepreneurial mindset. Let's explore some other areas that may be underutilized, not only for cost-cutting purposes, but also for opportunities for new revenue generation. Now, that's the way I would say. Now, perhaps others may say it another way, but instead of firing everybody, let's maximize our existing resources to grow our assets. Either way, the point here is that the city manager, the council, and the advisors, in other words, you, have a better chance at coming to a reasonable resolution to a problem than the city manager alone. Because that's exactly what happens in polarized communities: stagnation. Remember, the problem is the problem, not the people working on the problem. Now, after all I've shared, I know you're chomping at the bit to get going. You can't wait to tell someone about what we discussed tonight. I know you're eager to give those policymakers what they've been missing, your critical insight. I trust that you're going to see to it that your local policymakers are churning out those best practice policies consistently. I can see it now. You're adopting that city department, learning all you can learn about how the court system is operated, how the police and fire pensions are funded, or what the residential requirements and hiring practices are in the public works department. I see you, and that's all fine and dandy. However, I also want you to keep in mind that some areas of city operation, like budgetary and infrastructure constraints, impacts of federal and state statutes, and compliance requirements, and unforeseen phenomena sometimes call for unpopular but necessary decisions to be made. The best thing you can do is try to educate yourself as much as you can on the situation. Discuss the matter with others and remain active in the fight to address challenges in your community. But what is not helpful is the constant bashing, complaining, and demagoguing. We see it occurring in communities when tough times arise. These behaviors only exacerbate challenges and extend recovery times. So stay active, but also recognize when best practice may contradict your preferences. Sometimes we'll all agree, and other times we won't. Understand, it's not personal. There are a lot of people engaged in a lot of activities at giving the city what it needs. And stability means there will be plenty of give and take. In other words, understanding your local government means understanding the role you occupy in it, and that every now and then you might have to take one for the team. So, in conclusion, if you asked me, Napoleon, I'd say yes. Then you'd say, what is the main thing you would like for me to take away from this talk tonight? My reply would be this: local government in Ferguson is a local affair. The council manager form of government in Ferguson is, in my expert opinion, the best form of government for a city of Ferguson's size, asset richness, and complexity. And best practice policy is crucial to ensuring that a competent, honest, and dedicated manager, city manager that is, has all the tools needed to do the job effectively. The combination of these elements will have a profound effect on Ferguson well into the future. However, no amount of policy and no city manager can protect the stability of Ferguson alone. So remember, local government in Ferguson is not only there to serve you, but it's also your responsibility to support and serve your local government in Ferguson. Thank you for listening. So any questions?
Yes, if anyone has any questions, if you would put them in chat so I can ask them. I think chat is open right now. So thank you so much, Dr. Williams.
Thank you for having me. You know, I enjoy these things. I love to talk. I love to perform. So it's always a pleasure for me to do these things.
And I could tell the performance aspects. Yeah, that was really entertaining as well as informative.
Yes.
Let me see, I'm seeing some comments start to come in. Okay. But I don't have any questions yet.
So that means I did my job. I'm good.
Oh, no, we got questions. We got a lot of questions. Some questions we have to think for a minute to ask them nicely.
Yeah, I just seen one pop up, and that is an awesome question, because in reading back over my presentation, I did recognize that. I said, you know what? Best practice policy is so robust and comprehensive in its definition that even attempting to touch on it will take me down a whole nother rabbit hole that would add another hour to the presentation. So I said, you know what? I'm gonna just throw it out there, and if I get the question, I'll try to identify 2 or 3 things. So first and foremost, one of the best practices, I reference it in the city manager setup. So the descriptions in terms of the way I describe the city managers are part of best practice. So you had one individual who was attempting to be an effective city manager. So that's professional development, that's going to conferences, that's sharing best practices with other city managers. So there's an association, a national association of city managers. And so going to the different conferences and ascertaining the different information and insights and trying new innovative things. But unfortunately, this particular city manager just didn't have the chops required to effectively manage that city and eventually failed. Well, in terms of that particular city manager and the best one, the most successful one, they were very similar in their approach. It was just that the homegrown one that I referenced was very talented and was able to implement those innovative policies for economic development, and the city experienced a great, awesome renaissance, right? Well, the two that were over to the right exhibited what's called some of the worst practices. So you just literally have to leverage your human capital. That's first and foremost. You have to empower the staff. And so if you're attempting to be a dictator and run everything, no one wants to work in that environment. So they essentially tell you, okay, if you want to run everything and you're always right, then you do it. And so you have low morale, you have high turnover, so there's no consistency. And so that's one of the biggest ones I'll point out, is in terms of the city manager style in supervision of the staff personnel. And then when we get into the budgetary issues, that's an entirely different category, but it is very important in terms of being innovative as it relates to how we're figuring out our fiscal challenges or working our way through fiscal challenges. Some people, take on a lot of debt. Some cities, take on a lot of debt. Some cities cut back, do downsizing of personnel, and some figure out innovative ways to empower the community. The most successful city manager did some things where it invited and attracted new businesses to the community, but did this without giving away, without throwing the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak, as it relates to the TIFs and the breaks. So I'm sure we know what some of these terms are, but that's just the main one I'll speak to. And then just one other one, when we're considering the citizen involvement, the highly civically engaged cities are not in and of themselves a positive thing. So to say a civically engaged city is not mutually exclusive with a stable, vibrant, successful city. It's just saying that it has civically engaged citizens. So what makes the high level of citizen engagement positive and impactful in a good way is that they are collaborative, that they are listeners, that they are creative and innovative, not that they're at a high level of polarization. So you can have a high civic engagement and have a high level of polarization. So it creates stagnation, it creates uncertainty, it creates factions and disgruntledness and pet peeves and wars and things. So that's another best practice on the citizens' part. That's why I said sometimes you got to take one for the team. Sometimes you just got to recognize that the best practice is not necessarily your preference. Okay, it may be a best practice for what the city needs now. So those are just two big ones that I'll point out. And the overarching one is essentially what Ferguson currently enjoys, which is the council manager form of government. That's, in my opinion, the best practice of the best practice policies.
Just mentioned the relationship between high polarization and stagnation, and trying to move that to a more collaborative action, which may require taking one for the team. There's probably is a lot of high polarization here, and some of it is based in different realities, different realities of where we are and where we've been. So can you address how do you take one for the team if the polarization is based in different realities?
Well, of course, that's kind of the fundamental foundation of polarization. Of course, wherever you stand in the right place and the others stand in the wrong place, and vice versa. So who is the standard bearer for what reality is? So if this is my reality, I'm the standard bearer for my reality. So my opponent or my thought of who my opponent is or the opposition is standing firm in their reality. So the worst thing that I can do is to simply assume that which or that where they stand is somehow not consistent with reality. And that's the worst thing that they can do in terms of my perspective. At the end of the day, as humans, we are limited in the aspect that we can never, ever experience anyone else's consciousness. And so in that simple form, I can never then base my decision or base my judgment on what that other person is experiencing based off of my experience. So I have to acknowledge that their experience and their assessment of what they're experiencing is theirs, and I have mine. So in order to come to a place to where we're identifying a common issue to address, at some point in time, we have to find common ground with all things held constant. What we attempt to do in these situations quite often is convince the other people that they're wrong. I'm right, it's my reality, I'm right, you need to accept my reality. No, we're never gonna do that. That's a waste of time. You're talking about grown folk. So what we need to do is identify the problem. So what is the problem? Now, if the problem is you or the problem is me, then there's probably no solving that one. That's why I made the statement that keep in mind, the problem is the problem, not the people working on the problem. So if we can identify that the problem is not the people working on the problem, we may be able to address and attack and solve this problem, you know, in some type of fashion of where we don't get all that we want on either side, but at least we make some progress.
Okay, thank you. So one next question that was asked is, what is council's role in advocating for changes in personnel issues?
Oh, absolutely. Now, one thing you have to keep in mind, so the best, smoothest operating cities are the ones that the members of that city's local government stays in their lane. So let's just establish that one right now. You stay in your lane, you good. If you operate in your lane well, you'll have no problem. And what that means is that, of course, the council is establishing city code. So they're passing the laws that govern that city. The city manager is an administrator. So that city manager is enforcing those codes. So of course that city manager attends those council meetings or meeting with the various council members and advising them on what that city manager is seeing on a day-to-day basis. And hopefully those council persons are taking that into consideration when they're drafting legislation. Now I've seen cities where the city manager drafts the legislation and hand it to the city council members, and the city council members trust that city manager to that fact. All they do is put their signature on it. Yeah, that's got a yay, all yays, all nays, okay, it's passed. And I've also seen where the council members are very involved in understanding the administrative challenges and the day-to-day operations, and they're considering that in their decision-making process, but that's an overall collaborative process, and those are the ones that work the best. But at the same time, they're each staying in their respective lanes. So the council members understanding that, yes, I have an abbreviated understanding of what's happening here at the city and City Hall on a day-to-day basis, because I'm not here every day, all day. So I'm not going to act like I know more than the city manager. But at the same token, the city manager can't act as though they know what's going on block A or block B, because that's where the council members getting all this flack. So when the council members bringing this concern to you, city manager, I'm open to hearing what the concerns are. Yes, and let's see how we can amend the way we're doing the inspections. Let's see if we can amend the way our police are doing their checks or yada, yada, yada. And so that's a collaborative process. And the best way of going about doing that is for everybody to, first of all, identify your lane. Second of all, stay in your lane.
Okay, good answer. Well, that should work. So I just want to remind everyone that if you have any questions, now's a good time to put them in chat. So the next question is, why have a mayor if the power is in the city manager?
Well, you need a figurehead. You need someone to go out and cut ribbons when a new business opens up. You need someone to kind of serve as the face of the city, because the city managers, administrator, they're doing work. So they ain't time to be going and meeting and all that. But some of the best city managers will get out and beat the streets and knock on some doors and be inside of those businesses. Because at the end of the day, it's sort of like football. I'm a big football fan. So in football, you have 3 phases on a team in terms of game. You have offense, defense, and special teams. And so if you look at the city manager is operating in that aspect, so to speak. So the offense is those innovative, proactive moves the city manager makes. Now, all city managers, when they first start, when they go into a city, they do an assessment, they get briefed, they do their research, and they already kind of did that when they're considering taking a job. So they kind of know what they're up against, right? So they start implementing changes and these innovative ideas that they have. And they working on the things that they wanted to experiment. They was probably thinking about this when they was in college. Now, I can't wait till I get my job, or I'm gonna implement this, gonna work. Okay, that's their offense. Then there's defense. The defense is the things that are the problematic areas of the city that's challenging stability, that's challenging their viability and growth and those type of things. And they have to address those putting out the fires and those type of things. Then you have special teams. Special teams involves the non-traditional things. So that you may have something comes down from a federal requirement, a compliance requirement, a new pot of money that's available, or something like a consent decree that all of a sudden the city is up under, have to meet these certain requirements. So you have these different things. That's the special teams area. Now, when the city manager is good and talented in all those areas, you really have no problem, and things will kind of rock and roll moving forward. But quite often, it's a bit much for the city manager. And that's why I really highlight to the citizens that city manager is counting on you. Those ideas, those supports, and not to be overbearing. And remember, I'm the boss, I pay your salary. No, but to actually be productive in the process and offer that support. And if none of, send a flower, send some chocolates, or something. Show your appreciation. And because that reciprocity is something else, let me tell you. And we already know how volatile the government environment, politics and stuff can be. So when we get more, cordial and collaborative and collegial in that environment, we will be amazed at what it'll do for people in terms of how they begin to maybe give a little bit in terms of that analogy I gave in give and take. I hope I answered the question.
I think you did, but let me ask, was your question answered?
Okay, I got a yes on my screen.
Okay, great. So I found it was interesting. I'm waiting for some more questions, but in the meanwhile, I found it was interesting that you said that in all, that you have found pretty good city managers in every decade that you studied. So know that I'm going to go back and see who the city managers were in every decade. So is there anything that stood out or any decade that's stood out as being one of the better decades? Or
that's a tough one because it all depends on what city you're referring to.
No, Ferguson.
Oh,
you
Ferguson
specifically said within Ferguson, in every decade you found that we had at some point we had a good city manager.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Probably for the majority of the time I studied was a good city manager. Now you have to define good, and maybe in terms of the popular narrative or in terms of what is most viewed in layman's terms, good may mean certain outcomes or what not. When I'm referencing good, I'm talking from an administrative aspect. So talking fiscally sound, talking longevity in personnel and quality, highly trained personnel, growth in residential and population, acquiring other land in terms of annexations, in solid business environment, a thriving business district. And now, were there some serious mistakes that happened along the way? Yes, but that came later. And in fact, if I really get down deep into the woods on this, in the transition that began to happen when we see the racial composition switch in Ferguson, the biggest concern I have is the dramatic change in voter turnout. That's my biggest issue that I have, because there was a dramatic change when we began to see the racial composition change. Now, it's an empirical question of what drives that, but that's something that I observed in the data, and it was continual through, and it was consistent in the other cities. So I say that to say this: as we see the racial demographic changing, we see the representation at the council level, the representation at the ground level, in terms of advocating for certain needs in certain communities, being absent from the conversation for a significant period of time. And so that's extremely distressing, because we see it wake back up, but by the time it wakes back up, the damage is done. The cake's baked. It's out of the oven. So it's like we can see right in the moment in time, in the span of time, when all the ingredients was getting put in the pot and the temperature was getting cut up. And then we put it in there and bam, here you go. We get this cake out. We got serious, serious problems that it's too late to try to work retroactively. So in terms of the decades per decades, and I can say that about each city. Now, where there's some very, very poor city managers, absolutely. But at some point in time in these cities, there were also very, very talented ones. And Ferguson was right up there near the top. In fact, I make this reference, I make this comparison. Ferguson essentially is University City at a certain point. And when I say that in terms of it being as solid, stably, as diverse, and it was with the core elements of everything we apply to University City today. So think of a term we use to refer to University City. Some may say eclectic, some may say educated. Well, yeah, you had an educated class in Ferguson. Well, some may say, well, you know, they were higher socioeconomic. Are you serious? Then Ferguson? You better do the math. You better look at your history. Ferguson started out with money, baby. It was built off money. You see the houses in some parts of Ferguson? Let's not get it twisted. So I say all that to say this: they were neck and neck, and there were some things that took place along the way that caused some serious concerns. So I know that's a 50-hour answer to your question, but essentially there's not a particular decade I can point out to say that this was the best one. I would just say that surprised me. I wasn't expecting to see that level of professionalism, that level of referencing to best practices. And quite often we get mixed up with the final policies that are put in place and the results of those policies with what the actual positions of the administrators and the policymakers were. Remember, the citizens are the boss. Keep that in mind.
Okay.
Not the administrators and the council members, the citizens.
Okay.
I can clarify what I mean by that. What I mean by that is I'm studying the political side. Remember, I'm studying local government. So the access I'm getting to the citizens and the business owners are my interviews or some oral histories that's in the repository of the Missouri Historical Society, from word of mouth, from newspaper clippings, online things. But in terms of the government action, the discussions in committee, the retreats, the discussions before policies were put in place, that's what I'm privy to. So when I'm privy to that, the racist exclusionist position is the minority in the administration, is the minority in the council, not the majority. So when you begin to see the policies put out consistent with what the exclusionists desired over those who were putting forth arguments for best practice, what you're seeing is a result of a small but powerful and wealthy class within the citizenry. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Well, I'm looking forward to replaying this slowly.
Okay.
I understand it. I do understand it. So I see one more question in chat, and I'm also looking at the time, and I know our hour and a half has just about ended. So I'm going to ask this one question, then I'm going to turn it back over to our fearless, let me turn it back over to Alan. So the last question I have in chat is, can mayor become city manager?
Ooh, that's a good one. That's a good one. So the can, technically, I believe there's no law prohibiting it. I've never come across it. It's extremely questionable, I think, in terms of morally speaking. But then again, how far does that go in politics? So as far as my expertise goes, they can legally, there's no legal prohibition as I am aware of in terms of Missouri statutes. Has it ever been done? I didn't come across an example of that happening. I did come across a few examples of some borderline similarities to that. Like for instance, an individual serving as, I want to say, the administrator or something, or going from maybe a council member to one of the elected officials, like an assessor, city assessor, or the treasurer, or something like that. I've seen those things, and then I've seen individuals come and go off from different offices and things, but I've never actually seen the transition from the elected official to the city manager official. The city manager, which is an appointed position. Never, I didn't come across that. But in terms of can, because I believe the question was, can?
Exactly.
And I believe there's no law prohibiting that.
There is not, and actually, we thought it was a possibility that it could have happened in Ferguson. It had not yet, but there was a time frame that had to pass in between a person being a mayor.
Now that sounds vaguely familiar, that I did come across something like that, where it was a stipulation, kind of sort of like the lobbying rule for our national leaders and stuff. Yeah, I kind of came across something like that. Now that's very interesting that you all came up against that, because that's some murky water. I would actually offer, if that was to come up again for the city, I would actually offer to, it just all depends on, I guess, how you feel about that particular individual and their service in the other respect in terms of the elected office, because that individual who would know the city more than an individual that served in that, I mean, that person most likely would probably be dedicated to the city, because they would have to have been a resident there for some extended period of time. So, I mean, those are some things to consider. Now, if it was a very polarizing and politically charged issue, I'd move on from it and be like, yeah, that's a no-go, and let it be.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. I will be talking to you some more.
All righty.
Okay,
Thank you
so
for having me.
thank you, but I'm gonna let Alan close this out.
Okay, well, thank you so much. This was excellent. Even for us who sat through this for a second time, there is so much to unpack. There's so much content that it was really helpful to hear it a second time. And then as your introduction, our focus has changed so much since March, as we've gotten, hopefully, some stability now with some of these positions filled, hopefully for a long time. So I hope everyone else got as much out of this as I did. I thought it was outstanding, and really, really appreciate everyone's joining us and for all of your good insights. So thank you very much. And we'll hope we can see everybody at our next event.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good one.